Hey, this is Ajay from Migration Experts. If you wanted to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend Dennis Giannutsas.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Dennis Giannutsas.
Hey, welcome to the show, Leadership is Changing. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Leaders everywhere confront similar obstacles because people are people, but everywhere you go, leaders are overwhelmed, disrupted, and under pressure. They run from email to email, meeting to meeting. Many leaders are not changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind. The purpose of the show is to take our listeners' leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. I believe we don't have enough effective leaders in the world today, and if we can get the leaders to step up and lead change, then they can inspire real change. Hey listeners, it's now time to adapt in our fast-moving world, and welcome to today's show. Hey listeners, I just want to remind you that we've got the Facebook group. You can check that out on Facebook. It's the Leadership is Changing. It's a community, it's a tribe, it's a group whereby people can join and come together and talk about the topic of leadership is changing. So listeners, my guest today is Ajay. Ajay, welcome to the show.
Hi Dennis, thank you for inviting me into the Leadership and Changing podcast. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure having you here. So Ajay, just tell us a little bit about your background. What have you done, in your career? Love to hear that.
Sure. Look, I migrated to this country, to New Zealand in 2007. I did my master's in business. So the leadership was actually started to develop at that moment. Right. My core subjects was strategic management back then, and since then I've been into different leadership roles as the operations manager and a few other roles, and been doing business since then.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, that's good. And so that's great to hear. So look, here's a question for you, and that is, you may have many people that you sort of follow, but who's your favourite leader? Now, this person could be alive or from history, so who's your favourite leader and why?
Sure. I'm quite a fan of Lee Kuan, Prime Minister of Singapore, ex-Prime Minister of Singapore. The reason why I like this guy, look, I think the way he managed the country and took Singapore from nowhere to somewhere.
Yeah.
His dealings with the industries and the management of the resources, and how he turned around a country which was nothing, and now what it looks at now. So I'm quite a fan of this guy.
Yeah, brilliant. And to see his leadership like that was fantastic.
Yeah.
And yeah, tremendous. And that he did work with that organisation, but he didn't do it just by himself. Of course, he had to have a team around him, people. But he did show them how to change and move forward, which was tremendous to see.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. And hey, look, the show is called Leadership is Changing. That's the title. When I mentioned that title to you, what does that mean for you?
Well, I think it's a fast-paced environment now. The technology, the environment, the industry, the global powers and the global economies, they're all changing. And I think that actually have a direct influence on every individual leader, how they pursue their career going forward, how they manage people around them. So I think there's a big impact of all those things on the leadership today.
Yeah, and I know that one of your businesses has been about bringing people into say this country and helping them do that. That's a big change for them, right? I mean, a transition from their own say city or wherever they live, coming to say New Zealand to live.
That's right.
That's huge. So they get to experience that. What do people think about when they're moving into another country, and what sort of goes through their mind?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of challenges for them. First is the culture shock. Second is the system.
Right.
They probably would have come from a system which was different to the country they're moving to. The education, the business environment, and the politics, everything changes. So, I directly work with people from all over the world, helping them migrate to New Zealand. And there's a lot of questions they ask, and I think that's all directly related to where they come from and how they want to settle into the new country.
Yeah. And of course they want it to work for them, right? It's a big commitment for them to come to another country.
Yes.
So if we take that analogy of people coming to here to live, and what about business? I mean, if people go off to go and start in a new company or start a new role within an organisation as well, they probably have some of those kind of thoughts as well.
Oh yes, absolutely. Because look, the way of doing business, they're not just changing everywhere. They also change from one place to the other.
Yeah.
And that change is a big change.
Yes.
So when people, I also help people out with the investment category as well. So they come as entrepreneurs to this country, and and they obviously have a lot of question around the laws, around how the accounting system works, how the tax system works, and how the employees, how they handle the employees, because they basically, again, it goes back down to the leadership, because that's what they would be stepping into if they're setting up a business in this country.
Yeah, and speaking about setting up businesses here, you've got other businesses here in this
Yes.
country as well, and so you've got a team working with you.
Yeah.
And of course, we've experienced of late the pandemic and so forth.
Yeah.
So how's your business or businesses and industry changed, and what kind of sort of pressures that put on you and, say, the team that you work with?
Yes, look, COVID has changed the way we do business. Things are not same as they were before February 2020.
Oh yeah.
There's a drastic change in the way you do business, and I think that's where a good leader needs to be, keep up to date with the new technologies and the new skills and new people, and bring them on board. And I think this is what helped me out. I specifically invested into people so that they continue working with me. I retained them. I paid them, I looked after them in this difficult situation, and that helped me out with surviving through this tough time.
Yeah, that's great. And so if you do look after the staff and look after them, that's great. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's very good. And tell me, if there was one thing that you could change in business as a leader today, what would that one thing be?
I think it's how I've seen leaders perceive things,
Yeah.
which not always right, and those perceptions are generally based, they're based on a second-hand opinion.
Oh.
It's not even a first-hand opinion.
Yeah.
So I'm part of a BNI group here. I'm part of there's a couple of other business organisations where different businessmen come together, share ideas, share their success stories. And I've seen people, they would perceive and make a decision based on that perception, and that actually gives you a lot of trouble. If you need to make those decisions based on your experience, plus your knowledge, plus your research, and I think that's one thing I always emphasize on, that look, you make decision based on your own experiences, right, and on your own research, rather than someone else's opinion.
That's actually a very good point, because the fact that, there is a lot of people that do make decisions, as you say, based on hearsay, based on gossip. And we'll talk about the gossip or the hearsay bit in a minute.
Yeah.
But the thing that also is very good is, like you just said there, which is you got to go and do your own due diligence. You got to go and do your own sort of research,
exactly,
to then be able to make that informed decision, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
What I notice is working with a lot of organisations, and if they're going through change or things like that, there tends to be a lot of gossip out there amongst the staff in particular, or others, because the communication hasn't been clear.
No.
Or there's been little communication.
Yeah.
Which means there's been a void.
Yes.
And if there's a void, then what happens? They want to fill the void, right? So they're trying to make it up themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what tends to happen.
Yes.
Do you see that as well?
Oh, absolutely. Look, employees, when you're managing your employees, their expectations are much higher as compared to what a business expectation is from the employee. It's generally not balanced. So when the expectations are not met, employee tends to go, and try to find ways and start communicating with other people who are not going to find a solution for them. It's the business or the leader, the business manager, is going to find a solution for them, but that doesn't happen. They try to look for options around.
So the one thing that you're saying is is what? What would you change today? You would make sure that you would stop the gossiping and stop that kind of the hearsay
Yes.
and people making decisions based on
I
that?
think it's effective communications and regular meetings.
Right.
That's very important.
Okay.
And that would actually help, filling that gap and bringing people together.
Mm-hmm.
And look, the goal is common. I think a businessman and an employee, the goal is to grow, to go far. If they go together, they can go far.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that'd be wonderful. So if they could work as a leader and as an employee work together, that's good.
Yeah.
What about employees' expectations of leaders? Has that changed?
It has. It has changed as well. Look, and COVID has played a big role in the last 10 months or so. Because, look, a lot of people have lost job and there's insecurities there. And I think that's where the effective leadership comes in handy, that need to give them that confidence to the employees. So I've seen within the industry and within the business environment, good leaders have actually invested into people,
Right.
rather than having their own personal interest ahead of that. So that has actually helped me out in my businesses. Plus, I've seen other people succeeding that way as well. So I think that's one thing which an employee need at this stage.
So they need to be developed as employees, but then I think I'm hearing what you say is that the leaders who are really smart and successful are the ones who are actually investing in developing their employees.
Yes, upskilling them.
Yeah, and is there anything in particular that they're being upskilled? Is it more around the technical thing that they might be doing in their job, or is there other stuff that they...
Yes, look, I think it's everything together. It's upskilling their own personal, whatever the expertise are, plus their social culture, Plus, look, the world is getting smaller, and you get people from all walks of life, and I think developing that good working culture it is also an essential part of a good leader at the moment.
Yeah, the world is getting smaller. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
How come it's getting smaller?
Look, I think the technology that's playing an important role. You don't have to be at one place to do business. Business can be done remotely, and COVID has taught us now. Zoom is one of the best things.
I bet you wish you had some shares in Zoom, right?
So I think that's where the world is getting smaller. There's more trade happening now. Obviously, COVID has affected that, but if we go before COVID, the more trade between the countries, people traveling more. Businesses are flourishing in other countries. The trans-country deals which are happening. So I think that all led to people coming together in a small group. Yeah,
so it's a smaller world for sure. And as you said, technology is just amazing and what we can do today.
Exactly.
And I know just this podcast, being able to interview people around the world, getting online and
you're right.
doing that with each other is fantastic as well.
Exactly.
So that's pretty cool, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. And so because we've got a fast, ever-pacing, changing world, it's just so much happening, right? So what makes a leader successful in your view in today's fast-paced, ever-changing world? What makes them successful?
I think the most important thing is to be, the leader must be accessible. Yes, so there should not be a wall between a leader and other people. Right. It has to be very, very accessible and effective communications. And I think there's a couple of other things which makes a leader successful today is upskilling himself or herself on a regular basis, keeping up to date with the latest technology and industry changes, and effective within one particular country. I think keeping up to date with the current affairs and how things are working out. Yeah,
and I think there's plenty of ways for people to stay in touch on what's actually happening in the world, but also, as you said, the current affairs. I do see a lot of people stuck watching TV / the news.
That's right.
And it's not always positive.
No. I think reading is, that's one of the things which gives you more insight to different topics. Either it's industry or business or politics or anything you want to touch. Yeah, technology is helping out, but it somehow also has some drawbacks as well on the side.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And so no wall between you and the employees is really important. The technology side is going to really help you.
Yeah.
Being out there and developing yourself and staying ahead of what's happening in
Yes.
the industry is really important too.
Yep.
And I see a lot of leaders whereby they sort of get content, stuck in their rut, if I could put it that way, whereby
Yeah.
they're quite comfortable with what they're doing,
Yeah.
but they're not actually staying on the cutting edge of the industry.
No.
Or if we take a surfing analogy,
Yeah.
they're ahead of the curve of the wave,
Yeah.
and they're trying to beat it right. So, and they're riding that wave. They're not actually doing that on a regular basis.
No.
And so
No.
I think it's a really important topic or point that you've made, that people need to keep developing themselves as
Yes,
individuals.
absolutely. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And so what other, you said reading, what other could be some other way or material, things like that people could do to help develop themselves?
Well, I think being part of different industry and business organizations, and attending conferences, and reading about other leaders,
Nice.
following them on a LinkedIn, and any platform you wish to choose. And it's all about getting to know more and more and more and more. It's just continuous thing, developing, implementing strategies. That's one of the things which leaders should work on.
Yeah.
And not just not focusing just on one a narrow vision. You have to be wider.
Okay, so widen your vision, which is great. But I think the other bit that you just said too is that, you could read and
Yeah.
do all these conferences, but
Yeah.
it's what you do with it that really counts.
Yes.
And actually executing and implementing
right.
it, which is going to be really helpful.
Absolutely.
Because I do know there are some people that I've seen over time whereby, they love to come along for the coffee or the sausage roll or whatever and meet people, but they get that feel good scenario.
Yeah.
But they don't actually do something with it. And,
No.
But I think that's really important. For
Yeah,
sure.
I think it's most of the stuff which is discussed in conferences or in other business groups, but people fail to implement those. You pick up an idea, you go to a conference, you pick up an idea, but it's just an idea which stays in your brain. And I think if you feel confident about it, go and implement it. That's where nothing's going to happen until you do something about it.
Yeah, and so for you, going back to the analogy whereby you've got other businesses and that, and talking about now just going and taking an idea and implementing it. There are a lot of people out there today, I think, leaders in particular as well, whereby they may have an idea, they may have something that they want to go and do, maybe a change or another business or another stream of income, things like that. Or they want to take their organisation to another level.
Yeah.
But sometimes they don't go and put things in place quick enough.
They don't, yeah.
In fact, they want it to be perfect.
Yeah.
Have you, in your experience of going and doing other businesses and other things, have you ever had it perfect before you started?
Well, look, you can't be perfect, I think you become successful by learning from your mistakes as well. So if someone's saying that I don't make mistakes, that person is lying. You do make mistakes, even though if it's smaller or bigger.
Sure.
That teaches you. I can share experience with you. When I started my first restaurant of my Novelty chain, and I went into it without research, as a hobby. I just wanted to do it. I didn't do my homework. And the first year of the startup, we suffered huge losses because obviously I did not research. So then I thought, I had two options back then, and that's where the leadership comes in. I had two options: either give up, move out, or sit back and see what mistakes I've made and learn from it, and then develop and implement strategies. I chose the second option. I went back to the drawing board. I said, where did I do wrong? I worked on a few things. I closed down the restaurant for a month. Nothing happens. Sit on it, research, and then got an idea that this is where I was going wrong, implemented those new strategies, made a success.
Excellent. Yeah. So listeners, if you're wanting to do something, as Ajay shares, go and do it. It never will be perfect. But the important thing here is that if you do make mistakes, and we all do, as you said, but that's where we can learn. That's where we grow. That's where we become more resilient. That's where we understand what we can do and our boundaries and our abilities as well, which is fantastic. The thing here is that sometimes some of us go and make the mistake the second time just to make sure it was a mistake in the first place, right? Yeah. So there's that. But if you keep making mistakes, that's not what we're talking about. That's not good. But you've got to go out and do it. You've got to go out. And if you can go out and do it, it's great. A couple of weeks ago, I did an event at the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron, where it's the home of the America's Cup. So the America's Cup was there and that. And so I did a little bit of a Facebook Live and said about adjusting your sails. So as you go out there, you know that you're going to go somewhere, but the thing is you don't know the weather conditions, and it can always change. And it's the same as you're sharing now about business too, right? Things can change. Look at COVID. And so you have to adjust as you go. It will never be perfect. It will be never... Because if it was, I think everyone would be doing it, right?
Look, everybody will be successful. So it's just, look, and that doesn't mean that I made that mistake and I'm not going to make more mistakes. You know, I may make more mistakes, but the damage of those mistakes would be much less as compared to my first mistake, because those mistakes will be still thought after. You know, I would have still given a bit of thought, and those mistakes will not be intentional. You know, they would be probably influenced by some government policy or maybe some other industry regulations. It wouldn't be a direct mistakes which I made in the beginning.
Yeah, very good. So Ajay, I've got a question here for you, and it's if I'm going to get you to get your crystal ball out now and start thinking about the future and that. So where do you see the leadership being in 5 years from now?
It's going to be very challenging. For us, for a start, it's going to be very, very challenging. So, you know, future leaders will have more competition. As I said, the world is getting smaller, so there's going to be more competition with in any industry you trade in. And I think if you don't keep upskilling yourself, you'll probably be left behind. It's again, you know, it's yes, it's hard to get to the top, but it's even harder to stay at the top.
Oh, nice.
Right? So, you know, the chances in the next future 5-10 years, the competition will probably push you more towards downhill rather than taking you upstairs. So I think that's where leadership is heading to. You know, work on your lead by examples. You know, that's one thing. You need to lead by examples. You know, you're managing employees, or you're managing your industry, or you're managing any sector. I think one of the key components going forward is going to be lead by example.
Fantastic. So what got you here doesn't mean it's going to keep you there. So even though you're at where you are, you won't be able to stay there. So you have to keep developing yourself, which is fantastic, and things will get challenging for sure.
Exactly.
So Ajay, hey, thank you for joining us on today's show. If our listeners are wanting to get hold of you, where should they go?
Sure. I should have actually introduced this in the beginning, but I'm a licensed immigration advisor operating in Auckland, and I help people with their migration queries, you know, from anywhere from the world. And the easiest way to get to me is my website, which is www.migrationexperts.co.nz.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thanks again for joining us on the show.
Well, thank you, Danny. Thanks for having me here. It's love to be here. Thank you.
Hey, listeners, what we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Change is incredibly scary, especially with the unknown and the unfamiliar territory. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing. Look out for the episodes as they are published, and watch out for them to being downloaded. We'll download them once they've been released, have a listen to them, put a review or a rating, and feel free to share them with your friends and your family and network. If there's any feedback you'd like to give me on the show, or if there's a question you'd like me to ask my guests as I interview them, or if there's a question for the Ask Dennis episode, send me an email, dennis@leadingchangepartners.com. Okay, listeners, until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.